you to week 10. This is our third last one of these. We've come a long way. So I've got a lot of things to talk about today. So as usual, I'm just going to get stuck straight into my presentation to you as soon as I find it, mind you. Here it is. And please don't be shy about stopping me along the way if you want to ask me any questions or anything. And yeah, we'll see how we go. So we're now in our final stage. So this is the 6th topic, and we're talking about what works, which we'll be talking about next week as well. So just to, why does it always say what wows? I clearly just keep copying that slide across and not fixing it. Fix it once and then never fix it again. So we are in the what works section. What works, Kath? What works? Can't even get the pen to circle it. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the deliverables for this week. But really we are absolutely on the home straight now. And so a large part of today, I want to actually look backwards as well as forwards. And I want you to be in a position to remind yourself of what these, using this hero's journey language, is the gifts and powers that you've amassed. I want you to think about what they are, because it's getting more and more important that you can bring this stuff together for your final personal reflection. And I know you're probably getting a bit sick of reflecting, but 3 reflections in a row gives me the opportunity to give you plenty of feedback on your reflection skills. So in the task that matters, you can do as well as you possibly can. So individual deliverables for this week. Again, reflecting. I've got an email from someone which I managed to delete on my phone, and I can't remember who sent it to me. I will go through my deleted mail later tonight and hopefully reply. But the person who wrote to me said it must have been one of you who has gone, is doing this straight out of their undergraduate life and is studying full-time, or hasn't yet had a management position or a role that means that you feel particularly comfortable with answering a question that's based around your organisation. So to just be clear on that, your options are always the organisation you're in now, an organisation that you are really familiar with. So that could be an organisation you worked with in the past, but it could also be a brand or an organisation that you're really familiar with. So it could be, for example, the university that you went to as an undergraduate. It could be studying online right now. You can think about it that way. I am also very happy, and you'll remember we started off doing a lot of applying design thinking to ourselves, to use design thinking tools and processes for planning how you were going to approach study, not just in this subject, but in your program, so your MBA or your certificate or whatever it is that you're in here to do. I am very happy for you to apply design thinking to your own career, your own personal undertaking. If you are going to do that, it might be worth just setting some time aside to have 15 minutes with me to just talk through how to make sure that you do all of the things that you need to do to make sure that I can give you the best possible marks. Because as interesting as the exploration can be, you'll be seeing more and more as I'm marking more and more pieces against the rubrics that it is that really the only way I can give you marks is if you do the things that the assessment tasks require you to do. And so if we're changing the topic so much, then we need to make sure that we're covering off the bases. So that would be my only recommendation there. Oh, and what do you know, in my slide I actually have a piece to reinforce that. In week 12, you are going to have to submit a group report. At the end of this week, you are going to be making your group presentation. Now, these are the two most significant group tasks. They have significant weighting behind them. And the group report is basically the follow-up to the presentation. So I will be giving you feedback. If your group is presenting directly to me, that feedback, a large part of it will come in the conversation we have on the day. Otherwise, you're going to be waiting for me to give you written feedback, but I will endeavour to get that to you as quickly as I possibly can. And hopefully, you know that that's now, unless I have weeks like the last one, I'm usually pretty quick at getting feedback to you, so you don't need to panic about it. When we think about where the stage is, you're thinking about, you're presenting at this stage to provide an overview of where your report is at. You'll find that the questions I ask, I hope, and the experience of putting together the presentation is going to help you focus your report and make sure that you address all of the requirements for it. So it is, we're really at the business end of the semester now, and I know it's a really busy semester and you guys have had a lot of things to do, but these particular upcoming tasks, your personal reflection, the group report, the group presentation, the group report, they are a significant proportion of your marks. And so it's really important that you really focus these in and make sure you know exactly what it is that you need to do, and that you are as strategic as you can be about doing it in ways that let me do what I love to do, which is to people good marks for good work. So as I said before, I'd like to just take a moment to remind ourselves of the journey that we've had so far, and just really go and revisit where we've been in sort of 10 slides or less with any luck. We've used the Liedtke and Ogilvie methodology as a focus, but we've drawn on a number of other design thinking methodologies. And we were lucky enough to have a couple of people in this class who have already used design thinking methodologies and who are more familiar with other types. So the one I've got on the screen here is the one that comes from Stanford, or the D School as it's now often referred to. This is the model that was really first coined by the design practice group IDEO. And you'll see that it basically, it's a 5-stage process, but it contains really the significant difference between that and what we've used so far is it actually has a separate stage for prototyping, where Liedtke and Ogilvie sort of put the prototyping step into the what wows as part of the testing process. Probably the other most famous model is this, the double diamond method, where we discover, define, develop and deliver. One of the reasons a lot of people, and myself included, really like this model is it gives you this visual representation of this idea of divergent and convergent thinking, that we start out with our problem and we diverge as we discover what the problem is and really give a great understanding of what the problem might be. And then we come back in a convergent way to really come up with a clear problem definition. In fact, many people will talk about, oops, sorry, I'm trying to get my pen and flipping onto the next part of the slide. Many people will really focus on this stage in the middle here. And that's often where people put their how might we questions, because a how might we question encompasses a really concise definition of what the problem is. And as you can see, I'm trying to sort of layer these up so you can see how they fit together. So once you've converged back in on your problem definition, then you diverge out again in your thinking to ideate and to develop new ideas. And then ultimately, though, you need to converge back in to deliver. And as I look at that, I think actually it's probably my bad PowerPoint skills as much as anything. I probably want to see this point here is probably should be here. These two are the first diamond and these are the second diamond, if that makes any sense to you whatsoever. Probably needed a different colour as well to really show that. And then the model that we're most familiar with is the Liedtke and Ogilvie model. So the discovery phase and the what is phase are pretty much the same thing. We're encouraged by the end of the what is to converge back in and have a pretty cool problem definition at that stage if possible. The ideate stage and the beginning of the development stage is the what if stage. Our prototyping and testing stage, or our development stages, they're in the what wows. That's the stage where we've gone from lots of ideas to whittling down or winnowing down to find out which are the best ideas. And then we go to that final test, what works, delivery stage, overlapping them again. And really, this is what we'll be talking about next week. And we're going to talk about it quite a lot in the context of co-creation with customers, where the reality is in actually using this in the real world, you might actually start with the customer right at the very beginning. Again, design, we started off with that beautiful definition at the front of your textbook, where design looks something like this, where we, start at one point and we come out at the other point, and that this is an unraveling. And even though we can unravel and set out our ideas of design in this nice ordered process way, and I have dragged you through this 12 weeks of doing things in a particular order, I'm hoping as you've gotten to this end stage that you can see the order is just an order. It's a structure. It makes sense to keep thinking about where you are at and whether you are diverging in your thinking or converging back in. But it still might work if you do it in a different order. And sometimes you're going to start at this stage and you're going to need to iterate back. And you're just going to keep repeating. So this is not a recipe. It is a process in the sense of it is making order out of a process that is really around making sure we get the design right. So design thinking is as much about the tools that we use as it is about the frameworks themselves. And again, we've used these frameworks where we've seen tools that are recommended for the different phases. The tools we've used have come from a range of sources. The ones that have been easiest for you to access are the ones that are in the Liedtke and Ogilvie textbook. But I've also drawn on in putting this together tools that are recommended by IDEO, by D-School, by Luma, the British Design Council. British Design Council are the Double Diamond Method people, Sticked-On and others who are very much focused on service design. I've also used the business model canvas. Again, there is no one right way. There is no one single set of tools for the job. Sometimes you're going to need to try lots of different things. Sometimes you will have a go-to tool that will work really well for you. So just to look at our journey so far, we have sort of starting at the beginning here. Oops, forget that. Starting at the beginning here, we've played with the tools that I put on the slide here. So we've played with diverging and converging our thinking, with stakeholder journey, customer mapping. We've done some interviewing for empathy. We've used mind mapping. Sometimes we call that affinity clustering, removing things around to find things that have affinity and then reorganizing them again. The how might we questions, one of my personal favorites, the rose, thorn, blood. I mean, to think that that came from the Boy Scouts is kind of amazing, really. We've used personas. We've used customer journeys. We've used the creative matrix. We've used some visualize the boat. We've used a case study to look at value chain. We've had conversations where we've used that language, yes, and of course, ideating and 7 million different types of brainstorming tools. So I'm going to work on the basis that it's 2017 and all of you have a mobile phone somewhere close at hand. I'm going to ask you to just participate here in a quick little poll. You can do it on your computer as well if you can find a screen. If you can go to poll EV, that's POLLEV.com/Nolan Legal. You should find that there is a poll question there. Let me just make sure that it is there and it's activated. I think it should be activated now. And just pop in what you think, which design thinking tool you think is going to stay with you. What's the tool that you think has been the most helpful so far? We'll have a little bit of a conversation and see what you like. I could sing and dance and do waiting music if you like, but that would probably just make you sad. I'm not moving till I see people are participating. I can see a little number down the bottom that shows me. Please yell out if it's not activated. For some reason, that gets hard to do sometimes.
It just says as soon as Nolan Legal displays.
See, it's always, the button is not obvious. Is that better?
Yes, beautiful.
Sorry about that. I don't know why it is. I think it's me. It says activate and I click the button and I think I deactivate it every time. And while you're thinking about what tools you are using, I can see there are 16 people here, so I'm not going to move on until I see at least half of you have participated. I need to remind you that there is a course experience survey that you should have received an email about or have some link to. I will send you some official materials about it, but it is really important that you complete the course experience survey. The reality is that's actually the only way my boss knows what really happens in the room, unless you spontaneously either complain or you ring up and say things are awesome. And it's one of the best ways for us to gather information that helps us continually improve. I got fabulous feedback from the first time around, which I think has really helped me improve this course again. And lots of changes are made as a consequence of that work. The power is in your hands, people, and I think you should exercise it. While we're here, let's just have a look at what people are saying, see if there are any significant overlaps. So value chain analysis with a big exclamation mark. Somebody loves that. What would somebody else do? So I love that too, as a brainstorming tool, throwing things around. Somebody can't choose between journey mapping and brainstorming. I'm seeing a couple of references to brainstorming, couple of references to, oh, gee, when they move around, that's a bit annoying, isn't it? Storyboarding, fabulous. Personas, fabulous. Rose Thorn Bud is what I was about to say before. Rose Thorn Bud is one of my favourites, so I love it when I see it in there. Personas are great. Somebody said all of it. I really think you need to make a choice, whoever you are. Mind mapping, affinity mapping. Isn't this interesting? There are 15 people out of the 16 here, and the 16th is probably me, to be frank, have put in what they think is their favourite. And, oh, no, 16, must be 16 other than me. We've got you all in. So many different people, and yes, there is some overlapping in the response, but they're quite different in so many ways. Human-centered design is something that is done by humans for humans, and different tools and different aspects will resonate differently with different people. So at risk of seeming trite, next slide, there is no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to design. And so as design thinkers, we need to focus on the problem. We've got a toolkit, And we've got quite an extensive toolkit. Now, the resources that you have mean you've got more tools to draw on than just the ones that we have experimented with in class, and that you've been forced to use because of the ridiculous number of assessment tasks that I make you do. You've got these tools, but each tool has its strengths and its weaknesses, and the tools will feel better. Some tools will feel better in your hands than other ones will. So as you're approaching a problem, think about what tools will work best for this problem. And just even going in with that mindset as you think about doing this final reflection, I think will really help you. Okay, actually, I'm not going to go, because I know you get the slides afterwards, and I just think there's more valuable things for us to do than me to read something out loud to you, and I'm at risk of doing that when I have really busy, noisy slides. This slide here was really about trying to pull together the different stages that we've used in Liedtke and Ogilvie against the double diamond method, and to just sort of remind you of what that process is. As I think about it, I need to move this slide actually back earlier so that I can speak to it with the other materials. Unless, of course, anybody's got any questions or concerns, frustrations, otherwise. So why am I at this stage going right back to where we started and just doing that high? Because that's where we started, wasn't it? We did a high-level overview of what design thinking is and what the tools were. I asked you to look at the tools, make a commercial for one that you thought might be a favourite tool. It'd be interesting to know if those of you just participated now, whether the tool that you found was your favourite was the one that you wrote a commercial for, and just reflect on how your thinking might have changed in that period of time. Ultimately, it is time now, as we move towards the end of the semester, for you to think about the ways that the tools themselves have kept you on track, the ways that the tools that we've played with have been able to help you identify the brief and the criteria that you have used, particularly in group assignment, and then also think about the extent to which tools can help you cull both test the viability of what it is that you're coming out with, or cull at the end of the day. So the next thing I want to talk about in relation to the what works stage is customer co-creation. And I want to throw this question into the mix. Do customers really know what they want? We've been talking about human-centered design. We have been talking about an approach to problem solving that asks us to put key stakeholders, namely customers or potential customers, in the center, and to really think about solving, well, firstly, identifying what their real problems are and solving for that problem using design, thinking, theories, practices, and tools. But is that sitting on an assumption that holds up? Now, you spent a lot of last week and the week before thinking about what assumptions you might be making and testing and thinking about the biases that we have. So I guess I want to throw in a bit of my own medicine and actually ask the question, is the assumption that customers know what they want the correct assumption? So before I do that, let's actually talk about what customer co-creation is. Now, in the text and in the process, we start to talk about it at this phase. But for many of you, if you want to bring some design thinking practice into your own work lives, or into your personal life for that matter, you might find that this is a tool or an idea that will resonate with you even earlier in the stage. So co-creation refers to any act of collective creativity. So creativity that's shared by two or more people. Co-creation is a really broad term, and applications for co-creation range from the physical to the metaphysical, from the material to the spiritual. And if you go and have a look at search engines, you'll get a really good sense of that. So who hasn't sat with somebody else and put a couple of words into Google? Something like, how should I? And then see what comes up next as it auto fills in what happens next. So that's co-creation of a search criteria with some artificial, well, with an algorithm, to be frank. But isn't it interesting when we do that with somebody else sitting next to us? And I don't want to know what's in your search history, so please don't tell me right now. But if you do that with somebody else, you get some interesting insights. So we're doing that all the time. We're bringing our own selves and our own history, our own search history in that example, into these kind of co-creation experiences. Co-creation is the process of engaging a potential customer in the development of a new business offering. Again, more and more the research that's been done in relation to co-creation, collaborations or product offerings suggests that the sooner that you can involve your customer or your potential customer, the more likely you are to be successful. And that it de-risks a problem-solving activity because it allows you to undertake really low-cost experiments. Let me go back to my original question about whether customers know what they like. The quote that I have here, and excuse that rumble, it's not thunder, my husband's taking out the bins, God bless him. The quote here comes from Steve Jobs. I think Henry Ford once said, if I had asked customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. People don't know what you want until you show it to them. That's why I never rely on market research. Our task is to read things that are not yet on the page. So that suggests that Steve was of the point of view that customers don't know what they want. But I wonder whether Steve wasn't asking the right question. So again, it's not going to surprise you that I think my underlying assumption is correct, and I want to explain why. We're not actually asking our stakeholders or our customers, what do you want? We're asking our stakeholder or our customer, what is your real problem? What is it that you, to use the words of Clayton Christensen, what is it that you hire that product or services to do? What job does it do? So if I have a cup, for example, a very cute cup here, into it, I try and, deal with this all the time, tell my family, they don't believe me. Is the cup just a delivery mechanism for the now somewhat cold tea that's inside my, that I'm drinking? What job do I really want it to do? I need to be hydrated while I work here. I don't actually need a cup. Maybe I need something else. Maybe there is a different way of doing the same job. So, sorry, I'm not sure who that is, but I'm going to try and mute you, if you don't mind. Sorry about that. So again, the question becomes, what is the problem that you're really trying to solve? Do you want to drill a hole? Do you need to buy a drill to drill a hole? Or do you actually just want to hang a picture on the wall? If you could find a different way of doing it, you wouldn't need the drill. The one that I struggle with all the time, and that I spend a lot of time trying to get into the heads of professional services providers, most people actually, I know this will not surprise you, but it surprises all the lawyers I know, most people don't want to spend time with a lawyer. In fact, they really would like to avoid time with lawyers as much as possible, even socially. I know it happens all the time. What they actually want is to do the deal, to make sure that the deal is going to stick, or that they want a problem that they have resolved, that they want a dispute to go away. Many people don't want to own a coffee maker. They just want to wake up to the smell of coffee. They don't actually want a cigarette. They don't actually want to go out and take something that gives them cancer. They just need to get away from their desk. They need to relax. They need to re-engage with the world around them. So thinking about what these things are that people are really trying to do is not the same as saying to the customer, what do you want? What do you need? It's about understanding at a deep level what their problem is and finding the gaps and the opportunities there to drive home a solution that really solves that problem. So the idea is actually where many, many entrepreneurs start. And working backwards from the idea, the traditional approach requires us to have an idea, make a business plan, create assumptions to support the business plan, create some financials, and then you need to tweak. So what does that actually mean? In fact, the question becomes for design thinkers, really, do we need to do all of that at all? Shouldn't we just work out how to solve the problem to start off with, come up with some ideas, and then experiment, test the assumptions, prototype, quick, cheap, easy experiments before we even get into that business model approach. So planning where you're headed makes all sorts of sense when you know where you're headed, when you know what the right solution is. So if the problem that you have is that you have to build 400 chairs to these specifications, you don't need design thinking to do that. You already know what the specifications are. You know what you have to deliver. You probably have a timeline and a budget. You don't need design thinking to just do that task. But if you have a problem and you don't know what the solution is yet, then design thinking might be the approach that you want to take. It asks you to set out on the journey without necessarily knowing what your destination is or what it looks like at this stage. In fact, it encourages you to let go of your presupposed ideas as to what the solution will look like. And that's very hard to do. So one of the things I'd ask you to do at this stage too, in your groups, is as you're whittling down to what you think it is, the solution is that you're going to propose is launched with your customer or otherwise, just take a little time now to ask yourself again, are you really in love with the solution or the problem? At this stage, you really still need to be in love with the problem. You really still need to be in a position where every solution you have is a prospective suitor, but because you love your problem so much, you're not going to marry it off to just anybody. You want to make sure that that is the right solution. Have you been subconsciously looking for the data that confirms your hypothesis? So again, continually asking you to check your biases, to check what it is that you've been looking for and whether or not you're looking for the right things. And at this stage, particularly as we are converging again, really take the time in your group to reward each other for being skeptics now. You needed to nurture your ideas. You needed for them to go big. Now is the time actually to reward people for coming up with further tests, further issues. Now it might be, I mean, you know, your time is limited clearly, but part of what you will be rewarded for in your presentation, in your report, is for you explaining how you're going to know once you've actually gone out to launch, pilot, co-create, whether or not it's going to be the right solution. The slide that I've got up here now maps out an approach for using customer co-creation from the very beginning. Now, this really is just a one slide summary of the readings that you have for this week. And one of the things that I think it's really important to notice in the collection here, oh, sorry, I'll get there a second. I really need to find a better way to do that, is nobody is, oh, Catherine, nobody is suggesting that you go out big time from the beginning, that actually it's a good idea that you work with and you co-create with the customers who are already on your side. And you'll see that a lot of organizations will reach out to their to the customers who are already endorsing them, who have high net promoter scores, for example, or who are on social media and talking about the solution, or just regular users of the product, and to bring them in for surveys, for to get their ideas, for beta testing the next rollout. So those kind of ideas can be really helpful. So I won't go through the detail here, but what I want to do is make sure that you're aware that the readings map out an approach to thinking about co-creation that might help you tweak and focus on how you're going to test your ideas or launch them. Clearly, you're not expected to launch any ideas, by the way. You will be in your presentation or your report suggesting how this might be done and what the metrics you might use for measuring are. So similarly, it's all about experimenting. A learning launch requires key customer execution and defensibility assumptions. So you really do need to think about, if you're going to launch this trial into the world, how will you know whether it succeeds, I should say, or exceeds expectations, perhaps. Another set of language that you might hear around this is this idea of open innovation. So open innovation is a paradigm that assumes that firms can and should use external ideas as well as internal ideas, and internal and external paths to market as firms look to advance their technologies. So up until probably, it's probably as long as 15 years ago, but we tend to, particularly in large organizations, think about intellectual property, particularly in the terms of inventions, as being an asset. And as you know, there are, or many of you will know, there are some significant legal hurdles around owning an asset that is of an intellectual property nature. So you will see, if any of you ever watch Shark Tank or Dragon's Den or any show like that, where people are pitching these innovative ideas, one of the first things that potential investors will ask is, do you have the patents? So a patent is basically a legal license to exclusively use your invention for a period of time. But over the last 15 years or so, we've seen that in a range of different areas, patents have become more of a protection mechanism for asset value and less used in relation to open innovation. So in an open innovation context, basically people are encouraged or have licenses to use often code or other technologies and to augment and to continue to deliver that. So let me give you an example. I feel like I'm rabbiting on a little bit here. Many of you will use the website browser Firefox. Firefox is part of an open innovation scheme. So where the underlying code is freely available and it's shared under an open innovation license, and that anybody can take that code and add to it, share, further enhance it, provided that they acknowledge the source of the code and that they share what the end results are. So there are also forms of open source licensing now that are used quite regularly, where there is an ability to, and by the way, open doesn't necessarily equate with free. It's free use as opposed to free beer, as someone famously said at one stage. So just because it's open doesn't mean that you don't necessarily have to pay for it or that you're not allowed to commercialize it. It just means that the way that you solve the problem is ultimately shared. central idea behind open innovation is that in a world of widely distributed knowledge, companies cannot afford to rely entirely on their own research. A number of you will have found that you've done all of this work and come up with some what you thought were absolutely brilliant ideas. And then as you started to converge in again to work out how to test those ideas and did more research, you found out somebody else thought about those ideas before you did, which is stressful. I get it. It's not, by the way, particularly problematic for your projects. If you don't tell me about the other idea and I find out about it, it won't add any credibility to you. But at the end of the day, exploring where you've got to and explaining that these ideas are already out there, and then thinking about how you might need to further work on them to make them unique, or how that idea is already out there. So your solution might involve partnering with the people who have that idea, or enhancing it, bringing it inside the fence in some way. The slide here, so the paper that you've got is recommended there is the Cheeseborough paper, which a number of the quotes in the last couple of slides came from. I suspect, depending on how big your screens are, this might be a little bit hard to read, but there are a range of different advantages and disadvantages to working in an open innovation framework. And if you are suggesting open innovation as part of your solution, you need to think about what the advantages and disadvantages are and mitigate for the disadvantages in your own recommendation. There are lots of different open innovation models that you might like to have a look at, and they come in a range of different ways. So the slide here is just really trying to point out all of the different ways that you might find open innovation models in different contexts. But what I want to do here, I'm hoping it comes up relatively quickly, is to just show you an example while it's there. So one of the most famous open innovation customer co-creation models is actually, I've gone straight to the Lego website. So anybody out there, out and proud Lego fan? I love it personally. I think it's the only reason I had children. Although there is no pain like the pain of a Lego block on a bare foot in the middle of the night. But Lego, when I was a kid, was all about just coloured blocks and you made what you made. By the time my kids are like 25 and 19, so, you know, the same age or a little bit younger than many of you. By the time my kids came along, Lego came in packs. Over the last few years, it's probably been about 5 years now, Lego has really reinvented itself with this idea of customer co-creation. And so the Lego Ideas website lets people basically identify what it is that they want to make Lego kits of, and basically the more votes they get, more likely the kits are to be made available. People who participate regularly can get access to special blocks that allow them to create their own kit. Sorry, I'm just being a little sentimental there. The Trabant there, my friend who passed away last week, one of his bucket list things this time last year was he went to Berlin and drove a Trabant around. And I'm thinking he would have loved that. So anyway, that's just me being sentimental just there. But I think this is, go and have a look at the website if you've got a moment. There are lots of different ways that customers co-create content. Social media is probably the one that stands out the most to you. Many of you will see that you are finding that there are brands, there are experiences where customers and stakeholders and interested people are basically crowdsourcing information and images that support a brand or support an idea or a political movement or otherwise. And technology enables that, but these are not technology solutions. They're co-creation human solutions. So my almost final question for you is, what skills and attributes do you think are needed to do customer co-creation well? Just hide results to start off with. Can you just take a moment? That should be activated now. You see, you guys have all been too quiet for the last few weeks. I've decided to find another way to get you to participate so I don't have to do all the talking. Can you see it? So what do you need to do customer co-creation well? By the way, if you want to use your voices, feel free to unmute and share. Summer coming up, so let's have a look. You definitely need insights, active listening and empathy, ability to take what the customer thinks they want and convert that to things that the customer actually wants. I think that's very, very insightful. An engaged customer base. An engaged customer base is absolutely crucial if it's there, but I think you can do it without an engaged customer base. In fact, I think you can do it without a customer base at all if you can find an engaged group, or you can engage a group who are concerned about the problem. I don't know if many of you have seen it. I suspect you all study so hard, and I teach another class on Monday night, so I've only seen the first one. I didn't see the second, but the ABC television program, current affairs program, Four Corners, has done a 2-week special on the state of aged care in Australia. And it came out around the same time as the decision was made for a Royal Commission around aged care. And they crowdsourced much of the content of that. They had more than 4,000 people who either worked in aged care centres or had family members in aged care centres, nursing homes, who contribute, and I think they had some suppliers as well, who contributed content to that show. And that's not a customer base as such. I mean, what they sell is documentary film when you think about it. So I find that really interesting. And the big word that just keeps coming up here is empathy. Empathy, 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 empathy. And for some of us, that doesn't necessarily come so naturally, which actually is not necessarily a bad thing. It's in the sense of, if we're constantly aware that actually in order to solve a problem, we really need to put ourselves in the shoes of the people who have the problem, then we understand the problem better. Next slide. I'll share this content with you at the end too, by the way. So really the big point that I want to make here, my whole point of today, is there is no one size fits all. There's no one size, one way to do design thinking. We have a framework, we have a set of tools, but we have to apply the framework to people and real situations. We have to think about the tools and work the tools that work best for us, make judicious choices about what's going to work best in a particular situation. And then when it comes to rolling out or testing and working out what it is that works, we need to do that with our customers or with our potential engaged stakeholders. And there is no single way to do that. There is no one size fits all, which is what makes it equal parts frustrating and fun. And that is all I want to say. And I just want to high five myself for getting there 10 minutes before the hour is over. Please tell me what I went through too quick, because usually I'm racing at the end. So questions, concerns, frustrations, thoughts?
a very quiet group here, really.
It really is. You guys spoke a lot more at the beginning. I don't know what I've done to you. I know you're exhausted, but and when you call me or you email me, you're all chatty, but I don't know what it is, even in the lead up now. Well, if you have questions, you'll send them to me, I hope. We have 9 minutes. If you haven't already done so, this would be a really great time for you to go and do the course experience survey so that people don't yell at me when we don't have sufficient numbers. It's all about me. And otherwise, I'm going to head off and turn that cold tea into red wine instead. Okay, so seriously, if you do have questions, please share them. And I can hear somebody coming to join us.
I just want to say, have a good night.
Thanks. Now, Jordan, are you in Papua New Guinea now, or are you about to head off there?
No, I'm about to leave. I'm about to go.
Okay. So, yeah.
Unfortunately.
Oh, well, it's an exciting and interesting place, I'm sure. But I'm assuming your picture is coming through very clearly, and I've had students in Port Moresby before, and we rarely get a very good internet line. So I was just wondering where you were.
The internet's shocking there.
Because there's no Telstra over there.
Because there's no Telstra. Yeah, well, I was just reading, apparently in Cambodia, I'm going to be lucky to get 3G. So it's sort of 2.5G is how they've been describing it. So, and again, if anybody else wants anything extra to do, if any of you spend any time in Cambodia, if you can give me some tips and tricks for what to see, where to go. No harm in asking, right? Okay, lovely people. Have a good night, and I will see you this time next week.